You dog.
Alright, hi you guys. So I am sitting here with my computer open with a whole bunch of notes because I know that you guys wanted me to do a video on how to interpret dog food labels and kind of what dog foods are good for your dog versus not good for your dog. And I think it's a really huge topic. There's so many things that fall into this topic. So I'm going to try and do kind of a generalized coverage of all of this stuff. I might not cover absolutely everything just because this video would be probably hours long if I did that. So I'm going to try and do my best, but I'm going to give you guys a little bit of information. Hopefully it will help you out with finding the perfect pet food for your animal, or at least give you some knowledge to be able to compare foods within your local pet shop. Alright, so the first thing that we need to know when it comes to nutrition with dogs is macronutrients versus micronutrients. Some of you may have heard of these two terms. Basically what it means, macro means nutrients that are needed in a high amount, and then micronutrients are nutrients that are needed in smaller amounts. The macronutrients are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Micronutrients can include things like vitamins and minerals, things that we don't need a lot of to have a functioning body. So what we're going to do is take a look at my dog's food. I'm going to show you kind of what things to look for on a pet food and things that you can do to compare two different pet foods together. So let's go. All right. So the first thing that you're going to want to find on your pet food is the guaranteed analysis. This is going to give you a really good interpretation of what is in your dog's food. So the key to looking at a guaranteed analysis is the fact that you have to know what the dry matter density is going to be in a food. It's important to remember that when you look at foods, there's going to be certain different levels of moisture. When you look at a canned food, of course, there's a higher level of moisture, which dilutes the protein or the fat content that's in that kind of can of food. If you have dry food, the moisture content is a lot lower, so it dilutes the proteins, fats, and fiber a lot less. So you have to calculate these things when you're looking at different foods. I'm going to give you the calculation. I'm going to try and make it as straightforward as possible. But you really do have to account for moisture content in the food to be able to compare different foods. Alright, so I've got my trusty whiteboard right here. We're going to be calculating dry matter content. So we're going to look back at our guaranteed analysis, and we're going to look at the moisture. So find the moisture level in your dog's food. It's 10% right here. So let's write that down right here. So we got 10%. And the dry matter content is going to be 100% minus that 10%. Ooh, that's a wonky 10, but hey. So when we do that, we get 90, right? 90% dry matter content. This is going to be important when we look at all of the different nutrients that are on that guaranteed analysis. So let's take a look at that. All right, so let's take a look at our fat content on our guaranteed analysis. We take a look at the guaranteed analysis, find the crude fat. It's at 16%. All right, so let's write that in there, 16% crude fat. And we have to account for the moisture that's in the food in order to get an accurate representation of how many nutrients are available for fat. So accounting for moisture, we know that 90% dry matter is in the food. That's the previous calculation that we did. We know that there's 10% moisture, so there's 90% dry matter. What we have to do is divide our existing 16% crude fat by that 90% dry matter. That is going to give us a total of around, I think it's 17.8% fat. Now this is the accurate representation of how much fat is in that food. Now, if you were going to compare this food to a food that's in the store, you would want to make sure that you look up the dry matter, do these calculations for the main nutrients for carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and then you can actually look at the existing dry matter content for fat and be able to make an accurate comparison between the two. You can't just make a comparison with these numbers because that moisture level can be very different depending on the food that you're looking at. So you have to do these calculations to be able to see which one is higher in levels of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. This is going to be the accurate way to actually evaluate it. All right, so that might be a little bit like iffy on whether or not you could quite understand the calculation that I did. It is a bit of a complex thing to do. Just remember, you have to account for moisture level in your dog's food. You have to be able to calculate the dry matter, really easy, 100% minus that moisture content. And then you also have to divide whatever percentages are in that guaranteed analysis by your dry matter content percentage. So that's going to give you an accurate representation of what's in your dog's food. So now that we've covered that, we're going to take a look at dog food labels and just kind of get a feel of what to look for, what not to look for in your dog's food. All right, so my dog's food is called Performatrin Ultra. It is basically a local food that is made here in Canada near where I live, and it's got a grain-free recipe. Grain-free does not mean calorie-free or carbohydrate-free. Carbohydrates in grain-free foods are added in through other means. A lot of grain-free recipes, the main way that they introduce carbohydrates is through potatoes. And in all honesty, I feel like potatoes are a much better source of carbohydrates than grain. I think dogs have a harder time digesting grain, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you have to have a grain-free recipe. It's personal preference. I enjoy a grain-free recipe for my dog. I think that it has more nutrient density in the food, meaning that there's more nutrients that are presented for the number of calories that she eats. Right from the get-go, from the front, you're not going to be able to tell a lot about your dog's food. You're going to have to take a look at all of the information that's on the back. Some really cool things is, you know, if they do represent the kibble size that the food is. When you have a smaller dog, you're going to want smaller sized kibble. You don't want large kibble that can potentially choke them. So you want to know the kibble size and feed accordingly based off of the size of your animal. You also want to look at some of the benefits. They're going to try and lure you into buying the food that you see by representing some of the benefits on the front. And so we can see that a large majority of this food's protein comes from turkey, salmon, and duck. 100% grain-free. And all life stages basically means that you can feed to puppies as well as to adults. It's a balanced formula that can address and accommodate all life stages, which is why it says all life stages. Nutrients and vitamins, great. Omega-3 and 6, awesome. Healthy skin and coat. Some of you have commented on Aspen's coat quite a bit. Definitely diet is one of the main things that helps with a healthy coat. Pre and probiotics, and no chicken meat byproducts. Artificial preservatives or artificial flavors. This is the most important thing. No artificial preservatives or artificial flavors. Those are two things you want to look for. You don't want a food that has to add a whole bunch of extra artificial flavors, because that generally means that there's not a high enough protein content to actually make the food tasty for dogs. And they have to add in artificial flavors to kind of lure the dogs into actually eating it. So look for that. That's one of the number one things that you want to do, is look at ingredients. So basically the general rule that most dog food companies follow is by placing the ingredients in order of weight, in order of how much there is in this dog food. So we know that turkey is the number one ingredient. It has the most weight in this food, so this food has a higher weight of turkey. Turkey meal, turkey, like different types of meals, that's not that bad. It just means that there's it's not necessarily like the breast that you're thinking about in turkeys, or the dark meat. It could be stuff like esophagus and, things that you might not think are appetizing, but there still is a nutritional value. Peas, salmon meal, duck meal, potato. And that's the important thing. So in a grain-free recipe like this dog food, you want to make sure any grain-free recipe that you have, that it has a source of carbohydrates. That is great. The first line has potato on it. We know that there is a high amount of nutrients that are given through potatoes in this food. Dried egg product, chicken fat, so that's great, and whatever. So you can go and kind of look through here. There's a lot of really good things. Another source of carbohydrates would be dried tomato, carrot, celery, beet, parsley, lettuce, spinach, whatever. There's a good level of carbohydrates in this meal. Again, with a grain-free recipe, you want to make sure that there are sources of carbohydrates in the food that are good sources. You don't want a grain-free recipe that does not include any carbohydrate source. That's not going to be balanced. So we can look, typically speaking, in the ingredients. Because I said that it goes by weight generally, you're going to have the macronutrients, the nutrients that are needed in high supply at the top, because they're going to make up the majority of the food. The micronutrients are going to be lower down right here. You can see calcium levels, manganese. Those are all vitamins and minerals that are needed in small quantities. Vitamin B12 supplement, folic acid, all of this is great. So basically you just want to look at what the first few ingredients are and make sure that you are satisfied with what those ingredients are, because they're going to make up the majority of this dog food. All right, final thing on a bag of dog food is basically feeding directions. You do want to follow those feeding directions because it is based off of calories. It also is going to give you, based off of the weight of your dog, what the acceptable amount is to feed. So I would recommend following that. Of course, I have French on my bag because I do live in Canada, so they do represent both French and English on all of their products. But yeah, so that's basically what is on a bag of dog food. All right, so basically that's going to sum it all up. When you are wondering about the percentages that you should be feeding of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and fiber, you can look that up. There's the jury is still out on a lot of that stuff. You will find a certain level of percentage of fats and carbs and stuff that is recommended on one site, and then it'll be completely different on another site. Generally speaking, we know that carbohydrates and proteins have to be the main source of nutrients, so those two have to be high, and we know that fat content has to be around in the teens, so it could be 15, 16, 17, 18%, somewhere around there. And we know that fiber has to be low. Fiber in high contents in food reduces the amount of nutrients that can be absorbed by the digestive system. So you don't want a high level of fiber, probably 5% or lower. I would say you can probably find things that say differently, but a lower level of fiber is generally accepted for dog food. So I hope that has answered some of your questions. If you have any further questions, you can leave them in the comments down below. Also, you could give this video a like. Let me know what dog foods you feed to your dog, and if you've done a nutritional analysis like this. Maybe you will, now that you know kind of the calculations that you have to do and everything else. And just good luck in finding the perfect dog food for your dog. And I will see you guys in my next video. I hope you guys have a really great day, and I will see you very soon. Bye.